Well, it's Child Protection Week and government has used the opportunity to call for the protection of children from any form of abuse in our country. Now, the problem is non-profit organisations working in the child welfare space are facing possible collapse. Budget cuts, of course, means less income and fewer opportunities for organisations to try and keep afloat. Let's bring into the conversation Janice King, who is the director of the Western Cape Children's Forum, joining us this morning. Janice, good morning to you. I appreciate your time. How much money are we talking about that's no longer going to be available?
Well, the child protection sector has not had an increase in their subsidies for the last 5 years. So that has actually been an effective reduction of about 20 to 25% every year, which is causing huge problems in the NGO child protection sector.
Is there any reason, to your understanding, why, there's been no increase and possibly why we could be facing more cuts? What's your understanding of why this is happening?
Well, the division of finances to all the different people who need money in the province is not equitable. I mean, if we look at education and health, get 29 billion this financial year, and social development gets 2.2 billion. And with the burden of protecting vulnerable groups, children, women, disabled, the aged, 2.2 billion actually just is not enough. And so the pie is just too small. I mean, the organizations have for the last few years have been sort of going to their reserves to just stay alive and to survive. But many of the organizations have already closed down, and we're talking about the Bedisa, RCFF, Child Welfare. They are just not managing to survive because it's an unsustainable funding model. And we're looking at like an immediate increase of about 33% just to keep the doors open.
It's about keeping these doors open as well, especially for the most vulnerable as well, because I want to try and get an understanding if these NGOs, then you've mentioned a few of them, Janice, that are not able to operate, what happens to these youngsters who've been abused, often abandoned by their families and other terrible, horrible things that no child should ever have to experience? What happens to them if they don't get this kind of help?
Well, these NGOs do about 55% of the child protection work. And if there's the child protection, which is the immediate protection that a child who is abused or neglected needs. And then there's also the prevention work. And so if we look at all the NGOs, it's about 70% of this work done by NGOs as opposed to government. But government gives 42% of the costs of these NGOs. When it gives itself 100%, it can do it much cheaper by giving the job and only 42% of the cost funding to NGOs. So if these close down, it's going to be a disaster for children who are living in abusive and neglectful situations. For instance, we've got 35 children on the street in Sea Point who've been there for years. They are fodder for pedophiles. They are addicted to heroin. They are being used as drug runners, and the children's homes have a 3-year waiting list. So, you know, the social workers who are trying to do child protection will, you know, recommend that a child is removed from their family or from the street and that they need to be in an alternative placement. But when they try and apply, there is no space. And I mean, the social workers' salaries are a third. No, sorry. The social workers get about 50% of the salaries of Department of Social Development. So the turnover from NGOs to department is so high, it's up to 92% in some organizations. And it's just an unsustainable model. So, I mean, offices are closing down and it's going to be a disaster. And I mean, if you're wanting the goals of community safety, community well-being, taking back what we've lost from COVID in education, you know, in the same way that you cannot teach a hungry child, you also cannot teach a traumatized child. So the services provided by social workers are imperative if we want to actually reach other goals that people prioritize more than child protection. It seems that child protection is not a political priority, which is a really problematic situation.
It really is a massive issue. You actually took what was going to be my next question to you about the sort of people that we're then going to have coming into society as they become adults if they're not given protection as children. But you've answered that already for me. So I do want to ask you this. So we're talking about government, Janice, as a last question to you, as I say goodbye to you. We're talking about government. Help me understand the scale of this. Are we talking national government? Is there a different picture in the Western Cape? Is the Western Cape government able to do something different to national government? Help me understand who I talk to next to try and take this conversation forward.
The NGOs in the Western Cape do have a very good relationship with the Provincial Department of Social Development, and we've met with them and they are sympathetic. The problem is the pie is small. So we're going to need to partner with the Premier. We're going to need to look at how the budget is divided. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Premier and National Treasury is who we're going to need to go to next. They need to prioritize children more because, as you say, I mean, children are the future. And if you are, the amount of violence and abuse that children are receiving now, if that is not dealt with early, then it perpetuates violence in the future. Children become perpetrators. So, I mean, we're looking at a 33% injection of investment, you know, whether it's from the corporate sector, whether it's from government, it needs to happen. Otherwise, there are going to be serious problems in the future.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to thank you as well, Janice King. As I say goodbye to you as well, let me just read a quote here from the South African government reflecting on Child Protection Week as well. And I quote, this is from the government saying, "It is in our hands to stop the cycle of neglect, abuse, violence and exploitation of children." But right now, it sounds like it's just words. It doesn't sound like the action is being taken. I thank you for your time, Director of the Western Cape Children's Forum, Janice King, joining us this